Mayank for the gracious introduction. Just an update. I'm no longer with Vidyashilp University. I'm back to a kind of individual practice avatar. I was also briefly away in the US for a few years, and since last year I've kind of returned to Bangalore, and I'm based there. Let me see if I can get this right, because I need to be able to see my notes. Where is that? Okay, I actually wanted to play this video for those of you who are not aware of it, but I'll skip it in the interest of time as well. Not seen it, I urge you to take a look at it on YouTube. My talk is really about using design research. So for me, the challenge was not to talk about design for government or design for public services, but it was design research. So the question that I asked myself was, how can design research be a part of this play? I mean, many of the answers are obvious, but I'm just sharing some thoughts for your benefits. So I just need to change this a little bit, yeah. The main thing is that we have to look at an ecosystem of players, actors, and agencies working together to actually create the composite mix of solutions for public systems of the kind that Dr. Jayesh was just talking about just now. And I'm glad to see that around the world, governments are really embracing design very proactively. And the latest, of course, for those of you who have kept track, is of course Donald Trump, the president of USA, who actually has appointed a chief design officer for the country, for the USA itself, and has set up a whole vertical in a sense. What I really like is the charter through which, or the executive order through which President Trump commissioned that agency or the officer, and the words used here, which are very significant, which is, I mean, he talks about usability and aesthetics in the first paragraph. Then he talks about the cost. He talks about the cost to maintaining. I like the phrase digital potholes. I mean, all of us, especially someone like me who's come from Bangalore, potholes are like a part of everyday life. And it's a kind of very favorite topic we are always going back to whenever there's nothing else to talk about. And it is a fact. I mean, it really has to do with again, in the last line, you can see improving the quality of life for our nation. It is a fact that potholes are affecting the quality of our life, are affecting our productivity as citizens, are affecting our peace of mind. And pothole is just a kind of example. If you think about all the different ways in which this kind of lack of reliability or quality or design in our everyday public space or public discourse hampers or curtails our productivity. I mean, Dr. Jayesh was talking about increasing individual productivity by 1.7 times, in a short time frame. But we also realize what it takes to get there. One example that I have to share with you from the international space in this domain, which I think all of us need to study very closely and learn from and try and adapt or improvise in our context, is the Justice Design Lab at Stanford University, which actually is I mean, now it's a project that's been running for around a decade or just under a decade. Its whole emphasis was to look at the overall user experience or citizen journey in the justice process, in the courts process. Now, what you can imagine is that, this is of course addressing the American population, American citizens and their experiences, but you can sort of multiply that by many factors of challenge or difficulty to make it relevant to our context, because we have such a huge, such a diverse population, such a thinly resourced justice system, such a weak and ineffective law and order enforcement system at the police level. So all the pieces that need to come together to actually deliver a wholesome, holistic, and effective solution which reaches down to the last citizen is a formidable challenge. But again, as Dr. Jayesh said, and I want to also re-emphasize that point, it is something that can be done, and it's something that needs to be done. And that's really part of why I'm addressing this today. What is the current process by which public policy is formulated, by which government officials or ministries or secretaries like himself, how do they commission or develop new policies? There's a standard policy making process which involves consulting, bringing in various experts. And what are the disciplines involved? The disciplines involved are economics, law, public administration, and so on and so forth. At the closest we can get to user research or design is really behavioral economics. That's a new entrant. Earlier even that wasn't there. Some places behavioral economics is actually coming in at the consultative level in terms of formulating public policies and executions. What are the research tools or methodologies that they use in order to frame the public policy or inform the public policy? Usually surveys, remote control trials, random control trials, administrative data, stakeholder consultations. These are kind of standard methods that they use to augment or to build the data set to actually inform public policy. However, as we all know, that the current policy kind of formulation and definition and specification process has constraints, has major constraints. Firstly, and most supremely, it is system-centric. It is not really about the citizen or the human being at the end of it, or the end user, so to speak. It is really about augmenting or making the system more robust. And in many cases, that is, you can see why it's necessary, because the system is easily liable to misuse. So it needs to have a lot of safeguards, a lot of guardrails to be built into the system to prevent its potential misuse. And that is the vicious cycle in which the whole public policy loop gets stuck. In order to defend itself against potential misuse, it actually excludes a lot of possibilities, and it creates challenges for people who want to benefit from it. Citizen input is at the most, like we said earlier, at the level of stakeholder consultation, where also I doubt if ordinary citizen on the street ever has been consulted by any platform to comment on or give inputs on a draft public policy. Even in the short time that I was in the US in the last few years, it was amazing for me to, as an outsider, not as a citizen, to see this kind of platform, public forums in the little town that we used to live in, where even small municipal decisions of changing the zoning of a space, or saying that, okay, this shopping mall has to be brought down and it has to be replaced by a community center. These were all public consultation. Everybody was invited to the town hall to actually come in for a meeting where people would put up these proposals, there will be people who will argue for it, there'll be people who argue against it, and then a public kind of general vote or opinion was also taken. You could speak up if you wanted to. These kind of decentralized decision-making platforms where the citizen feels and actually has the platform to comment or advise or propose or criticize even some kind of proposals or ideas doesn't exist in our life. We know that we talk about technology. We know that in theory this should be easily doable now, through digital media, through an app. And why can't it be done? But there's a big, again, challenge or a gap between the intention and the execution. I think design research needs to step in here and start playing a more proactive role. And this is where my appeal is not only to the government to actually use design research more comprehensively, but also to the practitioner community and to the academic community to actually step up to the challenge, because many of the things that design research brings to the table will actually open up that whole policy loop that you saw earlier and enrich it with really important and key data points that will become very effective when it comes down to the last mile implementation or last minute implementation. Some of the ways in which I think that, or I foresee that design research can actually make an impact is by actually streamlining services, by seeing government or public services as a service design operation, by being able to analyze it and deconstruct it, identify gaps, bumps on the way, or complete exclusions. Most importantly, address jobs to be done. There's a big gap in understanding between what public policy sees as citizens' needs versus how citizens themselves see their own needs, and what are their priorities in that. Data to be generated at the very, very local and granular level, and going beyond efficiency, going beyond just cost and economics, which of course is important and absolutely critical. We are not bypassing that. But how do we go beyond the kind of holy grail, if you like, of efficiency and productivity by bringing in other factors, other metrics like trust, like inclusivity, like satisfaction. I mean, again, Dr. Jayesh talked about the Human Development Index. That is a very useful reference for us. How do we pull out those metrics which are used in measuring human development and apply them or use them to assess and evaluate the ground situation and to propose new frameworks for both measurement as well as action and intervention. Here, I really got inspired. This was just a random connection that I made on the 26th of January, is that one of the biggest sources guiding values for impact for design and design research, obviously, is there in our preamble, the Constitution preamble, which is the, not the bold word or the capitalized word, it's a small letter word called dignity. But I'm very happy to see Dr. Jayesh also talked about dignity, social dignity he talked about. And he said not just for people like us, but for all the way down the line. How can we ensure and assure this kind of dignity, which is a subjective state of mind or state of being, to every citizen of this country, from top to bottom? And I think, and I assert that design has a role to play in that, because design actually makes a direct contribution to the quality of our experience. And it should, if it doesn't. And it should not be just limited to those of us who are benefiting from design in the kind of space that we occupy, but for every citizen almost as a matter of right. And that, I think, is my appeal to government, is to also pick up this value from our Constitution and convert this into an actionable framework. And that's where I think design research can also contribute. I've just done a very quick exercise here of taking the very high-level ideals from the Constitution, mapping them into the different policy spaces, and mapping those into possible intervention areas. This linkage, this connection, if we can demonstrate, and if we can actually model in a very, very kind of actionable way, we can actually be making a big contribution to how the state can start deploying design at scale and at the kind of ground level itself. One of the problems with policy intervention, implementation, is that it follows the kind of waterfall method, right? This goes to the next level, which goes to the next level, which goes to the next level, which means that by the time things have come to the bottom level, the original intent has been lost or has become distorted or morphed into something completely different. Which is why, again, if we can come up with alternative frameworks, alternative conceptual frameworks as well, and operational frameworks, which allow us to sort of achieve the same results, but keep in mind certain constants throughout the process, instead of losing track on them. And here is an image that shows that better. So if that's what the Constitution promises us, by the time it reaches down there, in our current life or in our current experience, there's very little link there, because it has gone through these other layers which have completely distorted or degraded or degenerated those values in some way or the other. How do we ensure that mapping remains available and live at all levels? That's the big question. So this segment was mainly for policymakers and government. Now I'm switching to the design research community, to the researcher community. What is it that design research needs to do to be able to play this role that I was envisioning? It also needs to evolve and grow. There are certain areas, here are some 9 areas that occurred to me. I'm sure you can come up with more or less, maybe, more effective ones. But that seems to me to be covering the new map of expertise set that we as design research practitioners or academics also need to start building for ourselves. I've by and large put my comments on the slides, and I can happily share the slides with the organizers later on, and you can have a copy of it, so don't worry about making notes. But essentially, we must really get into the policy space. We have to really, and with the spirit of a learner, not with the spirit of an expert. So we have to really be embedded learners in the policy implementation and formulation, the entire cycle, and kind of journey with the policy as it starts from the first flag or first demand all the way to its final implementation or rollout, or even if it gets dropped along the way, to learn for ourselves what actually happens in that space. Participation, he also talked about bringing people in people's inclusion and involvement into the decision making, into the policy making framework. And he mentioned Kerala as one of the highest HDI ranking states in India, at least. And to be honest, if you've seen the ratings of Kerala on the Human Development Index, it ranks pretty high even on the global scale. But one of the secrets of why Kerala has managed to do that, there are many reasons. One of the reasons is that they have actually engaged citizens in making decisions about their own lives, about their own government. So design research needs to embrace user participation, user involvement at a very diverse level and at a scale level, very extensively. We have to also get into operationalizing research so that it actually becomes part of a continuous process rather than as a need-based tool that we can deploy. And that's the other appeal that I would also make to both government and to design research practitioners, is not see design research as a piecemeal thing. That, okay, we are planning something new, let's bring in a research team to generate some baseline statistics or details about it and generate some frameworks that we can then take forward. But make it a continuous process, especially in government, where this is the job of government is to constantly keep doing this. We need a kind of similar research cycle or process that is also running concurrently all the time. Of course, data and algorithms have to be seen, and now, of course, AI, that's the new piece that got added on, as determinants of power dynamics. So we have to also address the issue of power hierarchy in our frameworks, in our approach to mapping phenomena and processes. This is something that we are notoriously very bad at. And even in the design practice space, we somehow tend to ignore or minimalize the impact or the influence that power has in terms of distorting the intention or the outcomes as against intentions. And we tend to have a very simplistic view of power dynamics in a social context, in a political context, which we need to really learn a lot better about. Of course, this is something that all of you must be familiar with, being in this kind of elite gathering. But at the larger scale, this is not a reality that most people, even in the design professions, really get internally, which is the whole spectrum of accessibility. I mean, we all perhaps believe, as I do, that no human being is ideal or perfect or average even, right? We're all in some way or the other imperfect or, even disabled to a certain extent or the other, whether it's cognitively or physically or emotionally and so on and so forth. And that's why we must look at a spectrum. We must always be looking for spectrums rather than just boxes, really. But this is something we have to, again, implement at scale. Now, when dealing with government, dealing with policy, dealing with decisions like, what should be the width of a road or a width of a pavement, how do we actually bring to bear this whole understanding of diversity of populations, especially in a country like India, which is even more diverse than a normally diverse place, to actually become more constructive and user-friendly as and when it gets implemented. Because one of the problems with public policy or public infrastructure is that it is designed for one category. For whom it works, it's generally quite good. Let's say the metro system, right? So metros work for one category of users because it kind of matches their persona and their use cases. But there's a whole category of other people who get left out because they were not part of the original hypothesis or the project proposal itself. Integrating the whole project from a kind of shared perspective and, engagement is one aspect, but how to create ownership is another issue as well, which is also an extension of the participation piece. But one of the areas that design research can and should draw on, because this expertise we don't have to have the expertise ourselves. This expertise is already there in other sections of our society, like NGOs or institutions and so on. And we have to tap into their knowledge or their expertise, their methods as well, to actually build our capabilities as well. This is the tricky part of the government public policy implementation part, is the whole procedural aspect of public policy, like tenders and so on and so forth. This is something that typically people like me, at least designers or old generation designers, we really feel to deal with legal and those kind of things is a really off-putting thing. I don't want to get into that. Just let me design my little sort of beautiful artifact and I'm happy with that. That is fine as an individual choice, but as a collective profession, we can't be in that isolation anymore. We have to proactively go out and become capable of dealing with and managing these processes. It may mean adding additional skill sets or capabilities to our organizational mix, by all means, or bringing in external consultants and so on, which is what I do normally when I'm dealing with projects like these, right? But it's something that literacy has to be built in our case. The most important part of research in a public enterprise space or a public impact space is measurement. So how do you measure impact? How do you document it? How do you generate learning from it? How do you report back to the funders or sponsors or patrons or commissioners? Like if he commissions you to design some kind of new intervention or gives you a kind of an award, how will you report back on the success or failure? And how do you do so objectively? I mean, everybody knows how to spin the information to make it look good, but that's not the point. As researchers, we have to be really, really rigorous to uncover and deal with the actual facts on the ground as they occur, and be fairly neutral as much as possible while reporting its impact. So typically, impact tends to get exaggerated hugely, like 10,000, 20 lakhs, 50 lakh people, children have been educated now and so on. But we don't see the change, right? All these vast numbers are being thrown around all the time. Life should be very different if that was actually happening the way it's claimed. And lastly, bringing in systems thinking, bringing in system dynamics. Again, I'm really happy that Dr. Jayesh used the term wicked problems. I mean, it shows the deep awareness that even our bureaucracy today has, the state bureaucracy, in terms of problem solving and taxonomy, vocabulary and terminology. I think all of us in our own little ways or big ways have to bring in system perspectives into any issue that we are examining, not just the specific task flows or journey workflows and so on issues, but also the larger map of systems issues. Let me quickly pivot to design institutions, academics. What should you be doing now? I mean, there are some things that we are already doing well, but what we have to add on to that is policy literacy, really, is what I talked about earlier also, is how to make your students and your faculty comfortable with the whole policy space. They can read those papers, they can make sense of it, they can have discussions on it. That literacy, that capability has to be nurtured and made normal in your context. And I see the contribution of design research in the public domain as the cognitive infrastructure, in how we make meaning, how we make sense of the infrastructure that we have. So it's okay to talk about flyovers and metro railways, but even at a cognitive level, how can we support the infrastructure of the country in such a way that people are able to actually make sense and make meaning of their environment or of their situation in life a lot more effectively. The practice aspect obviously remains important as design is intrinsically a practice-oriented profession. We need to be teaching, of course, bring in studios which are now dealing with policies, which bring in the other disciplines involved in policy making and expose students to collaborating with those disciplines. That's really a big leap ahead. Bring in a lot more participatory fieldwork and ethics in the context of research work. And also start piloting with public institutions. I mean, there's a great opportunity you had from Dr. Jayesh, who invited all of us to actually step up and come up to him with proposals. This is a great opportunity. Can we set up some pilots that are useful there or not? I mean, this is not something to be done in detail, but just for my own interest, I was generating a kind of master's syllabus. I have taken some lectures on design thinking at the School of Public Policy here in Hyderabad, KSPP. And I think there's a similar kind of opportunity in design research, or like a design for public policy or design for public context, a master's program to be offered at the institution level. So design research is not an add-on. It should, and that's my hope and wish, become a kind of core enabling infrastructure for transformation of public systems and government. It means we have to add new capabilities to our practice. We have to actually influence education to also collaborate with us and work with us. And we have to involve or go and form partnerships with the state, with the public domain itself. If we are able to kind of make all these things work together, I think we really have a lot of opportunity to grow from where we are to where the vision that Dr. Jayesh has been outlining for us. Thank you.
Invite Dr. Raman to please
diagnose me.
Okay, so I think just want to say that, right now you're seeing the 3 digits of NID. Yes. 38,
2000